Welcome. It's a genuine pleasure to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. It's truly wonderful to share this space with you.
We really want to start by framing our time together today with, well, a single remarkable fact. Every single day, your heart beats around 100,000 times.
Yeah. Which is just an enormous number when you actually pause to think about it.
Right, and it's continuously pumping blood through 60,000 miles of blood vessels.
60,000 miles. It's hard to even conceptualize that scale.
It really is. And when you consider the sheer scale of that ongoing effort, you start to realize that the food you put into your body is not just fuel.
No, not at all.
It is the raw structural material that your body uses to actively rebuild those miles of vessels. Feeding yourself it's a profound act of self-care.
I love that phrasing. It really is self-care at the most biological level.
Exactly. And today, we are going to take our time to thoroughly explore how your daily nutritional choices directly influence your cardiovascular architecture. We're in no rush here. We're going to calmly examine the evidence-backed dietary patterns that support heart health.
And we really want to focus purely on the fascinating biological mechanisms at play, moving at a very relaxed, deliberate pace.
Yeah. Because moving past that vague, often overwhelming concept of just, eating well allows us to look closely at what's actually happening inside.
Right. We can look at the precise biological mechanisms that keep your cardiovascular engine running smoothly. We're basically looking at a clear roadmap for vitality.
And to understand how to build that vitality, we really must look at the two architectural frameworks that consistently demonstrate the most significant benefits for the human heart.
Yes. And those are the DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, and the Mediterranean diet.
Both of those frameworks are brought up constantly in cardiovascular discussions, like you hear about them everywhere.
You do. But when you strip away the labels, their underlying architecture is remarkably similar.
Right. They are both fundamentally plant-based at their core, prioritizing minimally processed vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans.
Yeah, and the clinical outcomes for both are very specific. They are proven to lower high blood pressure, reduce the risk of heart failure, and significantly lower the circulating levels of LDL cholesterol in the blood.
Let's just pause on that last point for a second regarding LDL cholesterol, because that is critical to understand biologically.
It really is.
hmm
We often hear LDL referred to as the bad cholesterol, right?
Hmm.
But the reason it is problematic actually comes down to its physical structure.
Right, because LDL stands for low-density lipoprotein.
Exactly. And because these particular particles are low in density, they're small enough to actually penetrate the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels.
Oh, wow. So they physically get inside the walls.
Yes, they do. Once they get trapped inside the arterial wall, they begin to oxidize, and that triggers an immune response.
Which eventually forms the hard plaques that cause blockages, right?
Exactly. And these two dietary patterns, DASH and Mediterranean, they actively reduce the number of those small penetrating particles in your bloodstream.
I often visualize these dietary blueprints like a musical genre, specifically jazz.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, with jazz, you have foundational rhythms and core rules, right? In this dietary context, the rhythm is prioritizing whole plants and healthy oils.
Right.
But within that framework, there is immense room for personal improvisation. You aren't forced to follow a rigid sheet of music note for note.
That's a really great way to look at it.
You can adapt the meals based entirely on the specific vegetables or proteins you genuinely enjoy eating, as long as you maintain that underlying heart-healthy rhythm.
And, that flexibility is precisely why these frameworks are clinically successful long term. People often abandon dietary shifts because they are trying to force themselves to eat foods they actively dislike.
Right, which just isn't sustainable.
Exactly. The DASH and Mediterranean patterns simply establish the underlying rhythm of replacing heavily processed components with whole foods.
You build a sustainable daily practice rather than, enduring some temporary restrictive phase.
Yes. So if those blueprints form the genre, the actual ingredients are the notes you play.
And the foundation of those notes has to be the produce aisle. Let's look closely at leafy greens for a moment. Things like spinach, kale, bok choy, collard greens.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They are consistently highlighted as cardiovascular powerhouses, and the biological mechanism behind them is just fascinating.
It revolves around compounds called nitrates, doesn't it?
It does. The mechanism of nitrates is truly one of the most elegant processes in human biology.
Let's take our time with this. What exactly happens when we eat them?
Well, when you consume leafy greens, your body converts those naturally occurring nitrates into a gas called nitric oxide.
Okay, and what does that gas do?
Nitric oxide acts directly on the endothelium, which is the ultra-thin microscopic inner lining of your blood vessels. It essentially signals the smooth muscle cells surrounding your arteries to just, well, to relax.
So it is actively causing the blood vessels to widen and dilate.
Yes. It physically expands the internal diameter of the vessels.
That makes so much sense. And when those pathways widen, the physical resistance drops.
Precisely. Meaning your heart muscle does not have to generate as much force to push blood through the system. The systemic pressure drops.
And the data reflects this clearly, doesn't it?
Very clearly. It shows that individuals who consume the highest amounts of nitrate-rich vegetables can actually lower their overall cardiovascular disease risk by 12 to 26%.
Wow, 12 to 20% just from relaxing the vessels. That's incredible.
It really is.
And we see a similar level of protection on the sweeter side of the produce aisle too, specifically with berries like strawberries and blueberries.
Yeah, though they utilize an entirely different biological pathway. They bring heavy concentrations of antioxidants.
Let's slowly unpack that. The role of those antioxidants is best understood by looking at the daily wear and tear your blood vessels endure, right?
Exactly. Normal metabolic processes, along with environmental factors, create oxidative stress in the body.
I always picture oxidative stress almost like a slow, microscopic rusting process occurring along the arterial walls.
That is a perfect visualization.
Yeah.
This rusting creates localized inflammation and microscopic injuries.
And a rough, injured arterial wall is exactly where that low-density LDL cholesterol we discussed earlier is most likely to get snagged, trapped, and eventually form a plaque.
That is the core issue, yes. The antioxidants present in berries act as chemical electron donors.
So they sort of sacrifice themselves.
Essentially, yes, they neutralize the unstable molecules causing that oxidative stress, providing a biochemical shield that prevents the initial injuries to the arterial walls from occurring at all.
That is amazing. We also have avocados, which offer a different kind of structural support through high concentrations of healthy fats and dietary fiber.
Yeah, avocados are fantastic.
Research notes that eating just 2 servings of avocado a week lowers the risk of having a heart attack or developing coronary artery disease by 21%.
21% is a massive reduction for such a simple addition.
It is. But I do need to raise a practical friction point here, just thinking about daily life.
Sure. What is it?
Well, fresh produce, particularly leafy greens and berries, spoils remarkably fast.
It does.
If you are managing a tight budget or a demanding work schedule, trying to maintain this fresh produce foundation can feel like a logistical nightmare of constant grocery store trips.
That logistical friction is a very real barrier for many people. But the solution is actually quite straightforward. You do not need to rely exclusively on fresh produce.
Wait, really?
Really, canned and frozen options are exceptional alternatives. Produce is typically flash frozen or canned at the absolute peak of its ripeness.
Okay, so the nutrients are still there.
Exactly. The nutritional integrity, including those nitrates and antioxidants, is completely locked in.
But the major caveat there would be the preservation liquids used in the packaging process, right?
Correct. That is where the responsibility shifts to reading the labels carefully. With canned vegetables or beans, you must select options labeled low sodium or no salt added.
And probably rinse them too.
Yes, it is highly recommended to rinse them thoroughly under water before cooking to remove even more excess sodium.
And what about frozen fruits?
For frozen fruits and vegetables, you simply need to ensure the ingredients list contains only the produce itself, without any hidden butter sauces, sugary syrups, or artificial preservatives.
That definitely makes the process significantly more accessible. Now, produce builds a vibrant foundation, but the human body also requires long-lasting energy and structural repair materials.
Yes, which brings us perfectly to the grains and proteins.
Right, the guidance heavily emphasizes whole grains, so brown rice, oats, whole wheat pasta, quinoa, and prioritizing those over their refined counterparts like white bread or white rice.
The crucial distinction between whole and refined grains really comes down to dietary fiber.
Let's explore that slowly. What happens during refining?
Well, refined grains have had their fibrous outer bran and nutrient-dense germ physically stripped away during processing.
Leaving behind just the rapidly digesting starch.
Exactly. Whole grains, on the other hand, retain that fiber, and that fiber plays a surprisingly active role in managing cholesterol.
I used to hear fiber described as like a broom sweeping the bloodstream, but my understanding is that it doesn't actually enter the bloodstream at all.
No, it doesn't.
Its impact on cholesterol happens entirely inside the digestive tract. It acts much more like a sponge.
That sponge analogy is biologically very accurate. You see, to digest fats, your liver produces a substance called bile,
Okay.
and it uses the cholesterol circulating in your blood to manufacture that bile.
Oh, I see.
When you consume soluble fiber from whole grains, that fiber moves into your digestive tract and acts like a physical spine, binding directly to the cholesterol-rich bile acids.
And because the human body cannot digest fiber, it simply passes through the system, carrying those trapped bile acids out as waste.
Exactly. And the brilliant part of this mechanism is the liver's response.
What does the liver do?
Because you have eliminated those bile acids, the liver must manufacture more. To do so, it is forced to pull more circulating LDL cholesterol out of your bloodstream.
Wow. So by simply eating whole grains, you are triggering a biological chain reaction that actively lowers your blood cholesterol levels.
It is entirely mechanical and incredibly effective.
And that same fiber mechanism naturally extends to our protein choices as well.
It does. Both the DHH and Mediterranean blueprints strongly advocate shifting a significant portion of our protein intake away from animal meats.
And toward plant-based sources, right? Like lentils, chickpeas, tofu, and assorted nuts.
Yes, because that way you acquire the necessary amino acids for muscle repair, accompanied by a heavy dose of that cholesterol-lowering fiber, all while entirely bypassing the saturated animal fats.
But when we look at non-plant proteins, the heavy emphasis shifts to seafood, specifically oily fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines.
Right. These are recommended 2 to 3 times a week because they provide concentrated omega-3 fatty acids.
And what is the specific biological benefit there?
With the antioxidants in berries prevent initial arterial injuries, omega-3s actively suppress the body's inflammatory pathways.
So they calm things down systemically.
Exactly. They stabilize cell membranes and reduce the production of inflammatory molecules, providing immense systemic protection to the cardiovascular system.
Now, if someone simply doesn't want to abandon meat entirely, the structural rules of the dietary blueprints still apply, just with tighter parameters, right?
Yes. The strategy there is to utilize the leanest possible options. We are talking 95% lean ground beef, pork tenderloin, or skinless poultry.
Because the objective is to extract the protein while leaving the heavy burden of the animal fat behind.
Precisely. Now, this protective dietary architecture we have been discussing,
The vasodilation from greens, the antioxidant shielding from berries, the cholesterol reduction from whole grains.
and the anti-inflammatory properties of omega-3s, it is incredibly effective.
It really is.
But it can be actively antagonized and undermined if we introduce materials that put immediate physical stress on the cardiovascular system.
Right. We really must examine these hazard zones closely, starting with sodium.
Sodium is arguably the most pervasive cardiovascular antagonist in the modern food supply.
The clinical recommendation is to cap sodium intake at 2,300 milligrams a day, which equates to roughly 1 single teaspoon of table salt.
And for individuals already managing high blood pressure, the target is often significantly lower than that.
Let's take a moment to understand why sodium is so heavily restricted. We have to look at the physics of the biostream.
Yes, sodium is highly osmotically active. That means it naturally attracts and holds on to water.
Okay, so when you consume excess sodium,
It enters your bloodstream and physically pulls additional water from your surrounding tissues into the blood vessels.
oh wow, so it is essentially increasing the total volume of fluid trapped inside a closed plumbing system.
That is the exact mechanical consequence. As the volume of fluid increases, it pushes outward against the arterial walls with much greater force.
Which is high blood pressure.
Exactly. Your heart must then work significantly harder, beating with more force to push that heavier volume of blood through the circulatory system.
And over time, that constant high pressure damages the vessel walls and thickens the heart muscle in a very detrimental way.
It does. And the hidden danger here is that the vast majority of our sodium intake does not come from the salt shaker on the dining table.
Right, it is engineered into processed foods to extend shelf life and enhance flavor.
Yes. So to control sodium, the reliance has to shift toward cooking from scratch.
Utilizing fresh herbs, spices, garlic, and citrus for flavor, and aggressively avoiding boxed mixes, instant marinades, and ready-made sauces.
Absolutely. And alongside sodium, the other major hazard zone is saturated fat.
Let's look closely at that. From a physical standpoint, saturated fats are generally solid at room temperature.
Right. We are looking at butter, the visible marbling in fatty cuts of meat, and high-fat dairy products like heavy cream and whole milk cheeses.
And these fats directly elevate the circulating levels of that small, dense LDL cholesterol we discussed earlier, accelerating the formation of arterial plaque.
Exactly. The clinical guidance states that saturated fats should comprise less than 10% of your total daily caloric intake.
This is where I often get stuck at the grocery store, and I know many others do too.
Oh, so?
Well, when trying to swap out saturated fats for plant oils, I will see a label for coconut oil or palm oil.
Ah,
And
yes.
because it is plant-based, the immediate assumption is that it acts as a healthy, heart-safe substitute. But from my understanding, the plant-based label is not always a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to fats.
That is a very common and very understandable point of confusion. The source of the oil does not override its chemical structure.
Okay, let's unpack that
So
slowly.
tropical oils, specifically coconut oil and palm oil, possess a molecular structure that is heavily saturated.
So they are solid,
V-
essentially.
Yes, biologically speaking, once they enter your body, they act much more like butter or lard than they do a heart-healthy oil. They will actively raise your LDL cholesterol.
Oh, wow.
So to maintain the protective architecture of your diet, you must bypass those tropical oils and utilize unsaturated liquid plant oils instead, predominantly olive oil, canola oil, or safflower oil.
That chemical distinction is so crucial for listeners to understand.
It really is.
Moving past the fats, we arrive at the final two antagonists, added sugars and alcohol.
Added sugars drive up internal inflammation and contribute heavily to excess caloric intake without providing any structural or nutritional value at all.
And interestingly, roughly 50% of all the added sugar consumed in the standard diet comes from a single category, sugary drinks.
Yes, this includes sodas, sweetened coffees, energy drinks, and highly processed fruit-flavored beverages. The other major contributors are traditional grain-based and dairy-based desserts.
And when we look closely at alcohol, the cardiovascular effects are complex but generally negative.
Alcohol requires a highly mindful approach. It introduces concentrated empty calories, but the chemical effects on the blood are more concerning.
What does it do chemically?
Well, alcohol consumption directly raises blood pressure. It also elevates the levels of triglycerides in your blood.
And triglycerides are essentially the main constituent of body fat in humans, right? They are the chemical form in which most fat exists in food and in the body.
Exactly. And when you have high levels of circulating triglycerides combined with high LDL cholesterol, the risk of heart attacks and strokes multiplies significantly.
That is quite a compounding effect.
It is. Furthermore, for individuals with certain existing conditions, alcohol acts as a direct toxin to the heart muscle, potentially worsening heart failure.
So the consensus is fairly strict.
The consensus across the medical community is very clear. If you do not currently drink alcohol, there is no cardiovascular benefit to starting. If you do consume it, the intake must be strictly moderated.
We have spent our time thoroughly examining the structural blueprints of heart-healthy eating, the biological mechanisms of the foods we should prioritize, and the mechanical reasons behind the hazard zones we must avoid.
We have covered a lot of ground.
We have, but all of this nutritional science ultimately serves one purpose: fueling an engine that is designed to move. Food and physical activity are two interdependent sides of the cardiovascular equation.
They are deeply intertwined. When we consider caloric balance, we have to acknowledge that your specific energy requirements are entirely unique to your biology.
They fluctuate based on your age, your biological sex, and your baseline level of physical activity.
Exactly. It is crucial to recognize that many of the most protective, heart-healthy foods like olive oil, avocados, and walnuts are incredibly dense in calories.
So you must balance the volume of energy you are consuming with the volume of energy you are physically expending.
Precise.
When we look at the clinical targets for that physical expenditure, the American Heart Association recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity every week, or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity.
They also advise incorporating muscle-strengthening activities at least twice a week.
And the mechanism behind why that movement is so essential ties perfectly back to everything we discussed regarding the blood vessels.
It really does. When you elevate your heart rate through sustained activity, the increased blood flow produces shear stress against the inner lining of your arteries.
And that physical friction actually stimulates the endothelium to produce even more of that vasodilating nitric oxide we talked about earlier.
Yes, exercise chemically trains your blood vessels to remain flexible and responsive.
What I find incredibly relieving about those numbers is how manageable they are when broken down.
How so?
Well, 150 minutes a week is approximately 20 minutes a day. You do not need to adopt a punishing, marathon-level training schedule or spend grueling hours in a fitness studio to condition your cardiovascular system.
No, absolutely not. The heart simply requires consistent, short bursts of elevated activity.
Taking a brisk walk around the neighborhood after dinner, intentionally parking at the far end of the grocery store lot, or repeatedly taking the stairs instead of the elevator. The heart responds to the increased demand regardless of the setting.
It is the consistency of the demand that creates the biological adaptation. Those daily 20-minute increments of movement compound over time, continuously reinforcing the flexibility of the arterial walls and the muscular efficiency of the heart itself.
As we draw this conversation to a close, the overarching narrative of cardiovascular wellness is really one of empowerment through understanding.
It is?
It is about recognizing the immense power of making consistent, informed shifts in your daily architecture.
Choosing whole grains to harness that cholesterol-binding fiber, incorporating a wider, more colorful variety of vegetables to utilize those protective antioxidants and nitrates.
Swapping heavily saturated fats for unsaturated plant oils and finding small, deliberate moments every single day to challenge and strengthen the heart muscle. It is never about demanding overnight perfection from yourself or adhering to rigid, joyless restrictions.
It is a lifelong process of informed, intentional maintenance. Every single deliberate choice you make, from the cooking oil you select to the 20-minute walk you take, is a tangible investment in your cardiovascular architecture. Your biology responds to every positive shift.
We sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Reserving this space to calmly examine the science of your own well-being is a meaningful step, and we really commend you for prioritizing your health.
It has been a true privilege to explore this with you. May you continue to find balance and vitality in the choices you make every day.
As you move forward, we want to leave you with a final thought to consider on your own. Think deeply about the meals that carry the most personal significance to you, the cultural dishes or family recipes that bring you genuine joy. Based on the underlying architecture we explored today, how might those favorite recipes already align with these heart-healthy patterns? And what deliberate structural tweaks could you experiment with to enhance their cardiovascular benefits, ensuring they nourish your heart without ever compromising their history or their soul? Take care of yourself, and we will see you next time.